together with 4th of July Queen Susie Markarian, were among the 8 who slugged it out with the non-Armenians, and the Armenians won.
Slowly, Armenians were entering into American life, into the National Guard, and into professions such as surveying. At Stanford University, they joined what were called eating clubs and graduated in engineering and geology. With the entrance of the United States into the First World War, loyal patriotic Armenian-American youths entered the army to fight in France. Others joined volunteer expeditionary forces to help the Allied powers regain from Turkey a lost homeland. Still others established a Red Cross unit at the Emerson School, or protested publicly at the genocide conducted by the Turkish government when over 1.5 million Armenians perished in the homeland.
By 1922, a dream had come to an end. America had been the land of opportunity from where rich cousins could support their Armenian relatives. But genocide at the hands of Turkey meant that America became the land of necessity. We knew there would be no return to the land of our birth. Because of the Turkish massacres, more Armenians came to America. Finally, our great General Antranik arrived in Fresno, a hero to his people. They gathered around him at the picnics. It reminded my parents of the old days when they sat under the mulberry trees of the old country. The quiet breeze at dusk in this valley reminded them of the fresh wind of the Black Sea blowing across the hills of Marzipan.
More than an era was coming to an end. The raisin fever was over. Soaring agricultural prices had attracted many Easterners and townspeople to speculate in farms and vineyards. After the war, prices fell sharply. Many Armenians went bankrupt. The shift of population now started to Los Angeles. Between the two world wars, discrimination and prejudice against the Armenians of Fresno had become commonplace. Some Armenians invited prejudice by clinging to the old ways, but mostly the prejudice was economic. The Armenians were hard workers and were tough competitors, and were growing ever more numerous. They were not permitted to join the exclusive clubs. The socialite ladies of the Sunnyside Country Club preferred to play golf by themselves. So the Armenians began forming their own athletic groups. It was not until 1929 that the first Armenian was allowed to be part of a high school football team. College sororities and fraternities banned Armenians. Restrictive covenants prevented sale of certain homes to Armenians. In 1927, the same year of General Antranik's death, the Fidelity Building was erected, but Armenian professional men were refused office space. From the earliest days of discrimination and prejudice, the Armenians had found a strong and stalwart friend in Dr. Chester Rowell, a physician and editor of the Fresno Morning Republican. But it was in vogue for most prominent people in Fresno to be anti-Armenian. Among the latter were some Armenians themselves. In these years, many dropped off the IAN suffix from their names. In response to prejudice and discrimination, the Triple X fraternity was founded in Fresno in 1918. In the early 1930s, the Armenian American Citizens League became the dominant Armenian organization. Its purposes were to ease the pain of assimilation by fostering the ideals of Americanism and in helping non-citizen Armenians to become citizens. The years of the Great Depression brought to a close the saga of the first generation of Armenians in California. Not all of the first settlers had died. Some lingered on, but their era was over. For 50 years, from 1880 to 1930, almost all Armenians in California lived in or near Fresno. Armenian history in California was essentially the history of the Armenians in Fresno, which had become a major center of Armenian culture. In time, the Armenians became the dominant economic group in the San Joaquin Valley. They could live where they wanted, enter any country club, buy any building. But economic depression now caused a great migration from Fresno. Already at the turn of the century, Armenians had begun to settle in small numbers in San Francisco and Los Angeles. Finally, in 1930, Los Angeles surpassed Fresno in its Armenian population. Armenians now carried their drive and abilities to many parts of California. They entered and excelled in new careers. Men like Ruben Mamoulian and Kirk Kerkorian achieved fame and fortune in the motion picture industry. In droves, the Armenians attended universities, studied law, medicine, political science. Armenians from California have come a long way during these short 100 years. They have risen to fame and prominence. George Deukmejian in state government, Chip Pershayan in the United States Congress, Mike Connors in television, and George Mardigian, famous restaurateur who became the friend of presidents. Armenians have entered into many fields: agriculture, business, the professions, and have contributed to the culture of America. As the old-timers of Jonathan Sinanian's era grew old and prepared to die, they must have seen in the faces of the new generation the acceptance of assimilation. Today, 100 years after the coming of the first Armenians to Fresno, there is again a new tidal wave of Armenian immigrants to California, this time to Los Angeles. They bring with them a new ethnic fervor. New generations of Armenians are now involved in causes the first Fresno generation long ago gave up for lost or never knew. Some dream again of the re-establishment of the ancestral homeland. They have built commemorative monuments for the genocide committed against Armenians in 1915. And they demand justice from the Turkish government. Is history repeating itself? Are we repeating a cycle of immigration and assimilation? Jonathan Sinanian, by chance the first Armenian born in California, and among the last of the first generations to die, has been a vehicle by which to relate this story of the first generation of California Armenians. He was born in 1884 and died in 1971. Great events and progress occurred during his lifetime, but he lived apart from them. Sinanian's lifespan covered a long journey of pilgrimage, poverty, prejudice, success, and Americanization. As with many other members of the first generation of Armenians in California, Jonathan Sinanian did not leave much information about those first pioneering years in Fresno. Life was one of hard work to survive and succeed in a difficult land. But what little we do know of these first California Armenians is a record of resolute will, of courage, and of material success. It is a legacy upon which future generations will continue to build.